All right, so today we're going deep, really deep into the idea of civilization.
Okay.
Which, I mean, we all kind of have a sense of what it is, but when you try to define it,
Yeah,
it gets a little slippery.
it really does.
So how do we even know if a society is a civilization? Like, what are the signs?
Yeah, what makes it different from just any group of people living together?
Right, exactly. And to help us figure this all out,
Yeah.
we've got excerpts from, you guessed it,
Yep.
a Wikipedia article on
Yeah,
civilization.
Of course.
But don't worry, we've boiled it down
Okay.
to the good stuff, the interesting, thought-provoking bits.
All right, I like it.
So get ready for a wild ride through history and culture.
Buckle up.
Exactly. So to kick things off,
Yeah.
does the article, give us a straight answer. Is there a clear definition of what a civilization is?
Well, right away, the article, it says that there isn't one definition that everyone agrees on about civilization.
So no easy answers.
But it gives us a pretty good starting point.
Okay, let's hear it.
It defines civilization as, and I'm quoting here, any complex society characterized by the development of the state, social stratification, urbanization, and symbolic systems of communication beyond signed or spoken languages, namely writing systems and graphic arts.
Whoa, okay, that's a mouthful. So it's not just about, people being nice to each other.
Right.
What does all that actually look like in real life?
Well, think of it this way. Each of those things in the definition, they're like building blocks.
Oh, okay.
You need the state, right, for organization and structure.
Okay, so laws and leadership and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the framework of a house. You need that.
I get it, the foundation.
And then you've got social stratification.
Stratification.
Which just means different levels of society that allows for specialization.
Okay, so not everyone has to be a farmer or a hunter.
Exactly right. Some people can be artisans or priests or rulers.
Like different rooms in that house.
Yes,
Yeah.
different rooms with different purposes.
Okay, so instead of everyone trying to do everything just to survive,
Right.
people can start focusing on specific skills.
Exactly. And that specialization gets a huge beast boost from urbanization.
Ah, cities. So that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Cities, lots of people living close together.
Lots of people means lots of resources, lots of talent.
And that leads to more innovation in trade.
Yeah, imagine a bustling marketplace.
Oh, I love a good market.
Where ideas are just flowing as much as the goods.
Okay, that's a cool image. But what about that last part of the definition? Symbolic systems of communication.
Right.
Is that just a fancy way of saying writing?
Writing is a big part of it, for sure. Think about how important writing is, right? To keep records, pass on knowledge, tell stories.
Oh, yeah, to write down that awesome recipe.
Exactly. The difference between trying to remember it and having it written down. But it's not just writing, it's any system, right?
Yeah.
That uses symbols to go beyond just spoken language.
So emojis.
Yes.
Right.
Modern day hieroglyphics, right?
Yeah. Whoa, I never thought of it like that.
See, and it shows how we need to communicate those complex ideas.
Yeah.
And it drives us to develop these systems throughout history.
Okay, so writing is a huge deal for civilization.
It's definitely a big indicator, yeah. And it's super important to how they actually work.
Makes sense.
But there are exceptions which are actually fascinating.
Oh, like what?
Like the Inca civilization in the Andes.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They had this intricate system of knotted strings.
Knotted strings.
Yeah, called quipus. They used those to record information.
So, no alphabet, but still a way to keep track of things.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
It's so cool. It's like they were encoding information in a whole different way.
It just shows how ingenious and adaptable civilizations can be,
Yeah, you don't need an alphabet to preserve knowledge.
Right.
It's amazing.
So we're starting to see that civilizations, they can take many forms.
Okay.
But they often share some core features.
And the article mentions a bunch of those. Right?
It does.
Like agriculture, architecture, infrastructure, even taxation.
It's like a whole web of interconnected things all working together.
Okay, so let's break down a few of those.
Yeah, let's do it.
Like agriculture, that seems pretty basic,
It
right?
is fundamental, yeah.
You got to eat.
Especially the ability to make more food than you immediately need, a surplus, especially from cereal crops.
Right. The article mentioned that surplus model.
Yeah.
But then there's that research from the Journal of Political Economy. That was interesting.
It adds another layer to it.
Right. It wasn't just about having extra food, was it?
Right. It was about controlling it and distributing it.
Ah, so who gets the grain and who doesn't?
Exactly. And cereal grains, those were easy to tax.
Taxes, the lifeblood of...
which then supported a ruling class, helped fund cities.
Okay, so without that surplus, no fancy temples or anything like that.
Exactly. You can't build those grand projects if everyone's just barely surviving.
So having a surplus wasn't just about full bellies.
Right.
It was about power and organization.
Yeah, those are key ingredients for complex societies.
It's about more than just being polite.
Way more. It's about these systems all intertwined, how food is made, distributed, how people govern themselves, interact.
Speaking of governing, I was reading that the word civilization, it's actually surprisingly recent.
Oh, that's right.
It seems like our whole idea of civilization, it's changed a lot over time.
Well, the word civilization itself, it didn't really become popular until the 18th century.
Wow, really?
The age of enlightenment.
Enlightenment, so like reason and progress and all that.
Exactly. And it comes from the Latin civitas, meaning city.
Ah, so right there, built into the word, is the idea of city life.
Right. And it reflects how people were thinking about progress.
Especially in Europe back then.
Yeah, the development of those complex societies.
But I imagine back then, the idea of civilization was also used to compare cultures.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe even like create a ranking.
Unfortunately.
Where some were seen as more civilized than others.
It was used, yeah, to justify colonialism and things like that.
Right, which was very harmful.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we have to be careful
Yeah.
about how we use language and the assumptions we make about different cultures.
That's a really good point. It's like even a word like civilization can have this hidden baggage.
It can.
It's complicated.
It is a complex idea with different interpretations changing over time.
So if it's not just about cities and big buildings, what else is it?
Right.
The article mentions civilization as a cultural sphere.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
It means, think of it as more than just the physical stuff, buildings, roads.
Okay.
It's about the shared beliefs, values, arts, customs.
It's like the soul of a society.
Yeah, the intangible things that connect people, shape their way of life.
It's like you can visit a museum, see artifacts,
Right.
but to really understand a civilization,
Yeah, they got to get those deeper things.
the underlying beliefs,
Their worldview, yeah, their unique way of seeing and interacting with the world.
that's where it gets really interesting. Because every civilization has its own story.
Exactly.
It makes me think about my own cultural identity, How has the civilization I live in shaped my worldview? What about you?
Oh, it's something I'm constantly thinking about, especially when I'm researching
Yeah.
a specific culture.
It's like stepping into a different world, right? What have you learned about yourself through these journeys?
Oh, so much. And it really emphasizes how important it is to preserve cultural heritage.
Right, especially in a world that's getting more and more connected.
Absolutely.
The article talks about that, the importance of protecting cultural heritage and identity.
Especially in times of conflict or rapid change.
Why is that so important?
Because a civilization's heritage, its soul, its memory,
Yeah.
it connects people to their past,
Gives them a sense of belonging.
shapes their identity.
So losing that heritage is like,
Like losing a part of yourself, it's tragic.
and unfortunately we see that happening in the world today,
Way too often.
where cultural heritage is threatened.
By conflict, neglect, even intentional destruction.
It makes you realize how fragile these identities can be.
They are fragile.
But civilizations themselves, they're incredibly complex.
Yeah,
Even beyond just the cultural stuff.
it's true.
The article mentions viewing civilizations as complex systems.
Right.
So what does that actually mean?
Well, that's a framework that helps us see how everything's connected.
Okay.
The economy, the culture, the politics, the military.
They all play a part.
all working together, influencing each other in these intricate ways.
So it's not just about being geographically close or having similar values.
It's bigger than that.
Civilizations can be linked through all these different networks.
Exactly. Like think of the Silk Road,
Ah, the Silk Road.
that ancient trade route. It connected all sorts of different civilizations.
Yeah, long before they had much political or cultural exchange.
It's like a hidden web with threads reaching across continents,
Influencing everything.
from fashion to philosophy,
Exactly. It really shows how interconnected the world has always been.
and how those connections, they can have unintended consequences.
Good and bad.
Exactly. And these networks, they can change over time, leading to periods of integration and isolation, which we see throughout history.
Makes you wonder about what drives these cycles of connection and separation.
Definitely.
Speaking of cycles, the article also talks about the kind of unsettling topic
Oh, yeah.
of the fall of civilizations.
hmm
Are there, like, any common reasons why civilizations decline and eventually collapse?
Well, there are a lot of theories out there.
Okay.
Some focus on the environment, things like degradation, resource depletion.
So basically running out of stuff.
Right, or messing up the environment so badly that it can't support you anymore.
Makes sense.
Others focus on climate change.
Yeah, that could definitely mess things up.
Or relying too much on long-distance trade.
Interesting.
Or conflicts, both internal and external.
So, like, civil wars and wars with other nations.
Exactly. And then there's the question of how societies respond to all these
Or
pressures.
don't respond.
Right. And that can make all the difference.
The article gives some specific examples, right?
It does.
Like to illustrate these ideas.
Yeah, like the Roman Empire.
The classic example.
Right. In his book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon,
Yeah.
he argued that Rome's fall was a natural consequence of its own greatness.
So, like, they got too big for their britches.
In a way, yes. He saw it as a kind of inevitable decline.
But I remember the article also mentioned a contrasting view from Peter Heather,
Right.
who focused more on outside forces,
He did.
like the barbarian groups putting pressure on Rome's borders.
Exactly. He argues that those groups, they got stronger over time.
Through contact with Rome, ironically.
Ironically, yes.
Yeah.
And they eventually became a threat that Rome couldn't handle.
So it was a combination of factors.
Internal weaknesses and external pressures, yeah.
It's rarely one simple explanation, is it?
Right. It's usually a complex mix of things.
It's like a reminder that the fall of a civilization, it's not just some abstract historical event.
It's not just a story.
It had real consequences for the people who lived through it.
Absolutely. And it's not unique to Rome either. We see similar patterns in other collapses, like the Late Bronze Age, the Maya civilization, even Easter Island.
Makes you wonder if there are, like, warning signs we should be paying attention to today.
It's definitely worth thinking about, right? What can we learn from these past collapses? How can we apply those lessons to the challenges facing our own civilization? It's something that keeps a lot of smart people busy trying to figure out.
Before we get too deep into the potential doom and gloom, I want to circle back to something that really caught my eye in the section on the future of civilization.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
The idea of civilizations beyond Earth. I mean, come on, that's straight out of science fiction.
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it?
It really captures the imagination.
The article just touches on the concept of non-human civilizations, but it's something that's been captivating people for a long time.
Scientists, writers, all kinds of people.
It's a big question. Are we alone?
And then there's the Silurian hypothesis.
Ah, yes.
That we might find evidence of past industrial civilizations right here on Earth.
Imagine that.
Like alien ruins buried under layers of rock.
It would completely change everything we thought we knew.
It's mind-blowing. It makes you want to grab a shovel and start digging.
I know, right?
But even if we don't find any ancient alien cities here,
Yeah.
there's still SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Right, using those giant radio telescopes.
Listening for signals.
Any hint that we're not alone.
It's amazing to think about the vastness of the universe
It is.
and the possibility that somewhere out there,
Yeah,
on some distant planet,
orbiting a faraway star.
there might be another civilization.
Asking the same big questions we are.
Wow. I mean, if we ever made contact,
What a moment that would be.
it would change everything. What would we say? What would we learn? The possibilities are endless.
It's both exciting and a little terrifying, right?
It is. It really puts things in perspective.
It does.
Even if we never actually talk to aliens,
Yeah.
just the search itself shows how curious we are
Our drive to explore.
to push the boundaries of knowledge.
It's what drives us forward.
And it brings us back to the heart of what we're talking about.
Civilization.
It's not some static thing. It's an ongoing process.
Of discovery, adaptation, evolution,
We've talked about civilizations rising and falling,
their cultural legacy,
the challenges they face, the uncertainties of the future.
and even the mind-boggling possibility of civilizations out there in the cosmos.
It's a lot to take in.
It is a lot.
So I guess before we move on, what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from our exploration of civilization so far?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's got you thinking? What's intriguing you the most?
Well, for me, it's the sheer resilience and adaptability of civilizations, you know? It's really remarkable.
Oh, tell me more about that.
They rise, they fall, they transform, they leave their mark on history and culture, and through it all, they teach us these valuable lessons about ourselves and the world around us.
Oh, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it quite like that.
Yeah, it's something that I find really fascinating.
It is fascinating. And, we've talked about all these challenges they face.
A potential for collapse.
The uncertainty of the future, all that.
But there's also this incredible story of persistence,
Creativity.
problem solving.
That runs through the entire history of civilization, yeah.
It's like this constant dance between creation and destruction,
Oh, I like that.
innovation and adaptation.
It's what keeps things moving forward.
It's what seems to drive progress.
Pushing civilizations to find new solutions, explore new frontiers, reinvent themselves.
Exactly. And it's never a straight line.
There are setbacks, detours, wrong turns.
But somehow, they keep going, keep adapting.
And, we talked about preserving cultural heritage.
Yes.
I think that ties in beautifully with this idea of resilience.
It does. It's not just about protecting the past.
It's about carrying those stories, those traditions, those lessons forward.
Into the future.
It's about recognizing that even when things are tough,
Even when they face immense challenges.
civilizations find a way.
They adapt.
They preserve what's essential, they rebuild.
It's a message of hope.
Inspiration.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we're not just passive observers of history.
Right.
We're active participants.
Or shaping it as we go.
We're all adding our own verses to that epic poem of civilization.
The choices we make today, the problems we solve, the values we embrace,
It all matters.
it shapes the future, for better or worse.
And that's both empowering and a bit daunting, isn't it?
It is. But I like to focus on the empowering part.
Me too.
We have a role to play, however small it might seem.
Every action, every choice contributes to the grand narrative.
It's up to us to make it a good one,
To learn from the past.
to build a better future.
A future that's more just, more sustainable, more fulfilling for everyone.
That's a beautiful thought.
And a challenging one.
It is challenging, but also inspiring.
Definitely.
And I think it's a perfect note to end on.
A good place to pause.
Before we continue our deep dive
Yeah.
into this fascinating world of civilization.
Because there's so much more to explore. It's that idea of civilization as this cultural sphere
Yeah.
we were talking about before.
It really stuck with me, too.
It's the thread that connects us all, not just like physically, but across time, too.
It's like we're all part of this huge conversation
Exactly.
about what it means to be human,
To build societies, to create art.
to wrestle with those big questions.
Yeah, the big ones.
And that conversation, it's carried out through the stuff civilizations leave behind, right?
It is. The art, the literature, the philosophies, even the ruins.
It all helps us piece together the stories of those who came before.
Like each civilization is adding a verse to this grand epic poem.
And we get to read it.
We get to experience the richness and complexity of it all.
Before we were talking about how civilizations can collapse.
Yeah.
It's kind of unsettling to think about, especially when we're talking about all this amazing cultural legacy.
It's true. It's like watching a library burn down.
Yeah, exactly. Like we can learn from the past, study the ruins.
Try to understand what went wrong.
But it's a reminder that even the most powerful civilizations,
They're fragile.
we were talking about the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
and I remember the article mentioned a point from Brian Ward Perkins' book.
The Fall of Rome.
Yeah, The Fall of Rome and the End of the Civilization.
A great book.
He said it wasn't just about losing power or territory, it was about the impact on everyday lives.
Right. He argues that the collapse in Western Europe, it really hurt people's living standards.
So it wasn't just about emperors and legions and all that.
It was about the quality of life for regular folks.
What kind of evidence does he use for that?
Well, he looks at archaeology, and he points out that a lot of the technology, the advancements that were normal in Roman cities, like indoor plumbing, heating systems, they disappeared for centuries.
Wow, so it's like going backwards technologically?
In many ways, yes.
You could see how that would impact every aspect of life.
Imagine a world where suddenly you don't have clean water or sanitation
It would be devastating.
for health, hygiene, everything.
So the collapse of a civilization, it's not just an abstract historical event.
Right.
It has real, tangible consequences.
The generations.
And it's not just Rome, right? We see this pattern in other collapses, too.
The late Bronze Age, the Maya, even Easter Island.
All these cautionary tales.
Makes you wonder, are there common threads connecting them? Like warning signs we should be looking for today?
Yeah, what can we learn from all this?
Yeah.
It's a question a lot of people are trying to answer
Trying to decipher the patterns of the past.
to maybe help us avoid those same mistakes.
Exactly, to inform our present and our future.
Well, before we go too far down that road, I want to go back to something else that caught my attention in the section on the future of civilization.
The future, always full of possibilities.
Right. And this one, I mean, it's almost too big to think about.
Lay it on me.
Civilizations beyond our planet.
Ah, yes, the big one.
It's like straight out of Star Trek.
It captures the imagination, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
The article mentions the idea of non-human civilizations.
A topic that's fascinated people for a long time.
And then there's that Silurian hypothesis
What was that one again?
that we might find evidence of past industrial civilizations.
Oh, right here on Earth.
Like, what if we dig down far enough and find some ancient alien city
wow.
buried under millions of years of rock and dirt?
It would change everything.
It would blow our minds. What would we even recognize as evidence? It's like trying to read a book in a language you've never seen before.
It's a challenge for sure, but that's what makes it so exciting.
And then there's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI.
Using those incredible radio telescopes.
Listening for signals, any sign that we're not alone.
Imagine that first contact.
It would be incredible.
What would they be like?
What would we say? What would we learn from each other?
The possibilities are endless.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about our place in the universe?
It does. It puts things in perspective.
Even if we never make contact.
The search itself is important.
It shows our curiosity, our desire to explore.
To understand the universe and our place in it.
And it brings us back to this idea of civilization.
Right.
It's not just about what we've built, it's about who we are.
Our values, our aspirations, our drive to understand.
It's about pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
And imagining what's possible.
So I guess as we continue our deep dive
into this vast and complex topic,
what are you most curious about? What questions are swirling around in your mind?
Well, I'm really interested in this idea of cultural transmission, How do civilizations pass on their knowledge, their values, their stories from one generation to the next? And what happens when that transmission is disrupted? Those are questions that keep me up at night.
Yeah, I can see why that would be fascinating. Like, what are the mechanisms? What are the stories that get told and the ones that get lost? It's like a giant game of telephone across centuries.
Exactly, and the stakes are high because those stories, those values, they shape who we are.
They influence our decisions, our actions, the kind of world we create.
And as we think about the future of civilization, it's crucial to understand how those stories are being told and who's doing the telling.
That's a powerful thought. It's not just about preserving the past, it's about actively shaping the future, the narrative that will be passed on to future generations.
And recognizing that everyone has a role to play in that storytelling process.
We're all part of this grand, interconnected web of civilization.
And the stories we choose to tell today will have a ripple effect for generations to come. It's about understanding how these stories shape us and how we, in turn, shape the stories that will be told about our own time.
It's almost like we're all characters in this grand narrative.
Right. And we have the power to influence the plot.
To make choices that will determine the course of the story.
Exactly. And that's both exciting and a little bit scary, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's a lot of responsibility.
But it's also an incredible opportunity.
To leave our mark on the world.
To contribute something meaningful to the ongoing story of civilization.
And even if we don't achieve some grand feat.
Even if our names aren't etched in history books.
Our actions still matter.
They ripple outward, influencing the lives of those around us.
And shaping the world in ways we may never fully comprehend.
It's a humbling thought.
It is, but it also fills me with a sense of hope.
Me too. Because it means that we all have the power to make a difference.
To contribute to the tapestry of civilization.
To add our own unique colors and textures to the grand design.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
A reminder that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
That we're all connected across time and space through this shared experience we call civilization.
And that the story is still being written.
So let's make it a good one.
Absolutely. Let's go out there and write our best chapter.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Time flies when you're having fun exploring civilization.
It really does. We've covered so much ground. From the basic definition of civilization to the theories about its rise and fall.
The importance of cultural heritage.
The mind-boggling possibility of civilizations beyond our own planet.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as we have.
I hope they've been inspired to learn more.
To keep exploring, keep questioning, keep digging deeper.
Because the more we understand about civilization,
the more we understand about ourselves.
And our place in the grand scheme of things.
So until next time, keep those curiosity gears turning.
And keep adding your own unique verse to the epic poem of human history.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into civilization. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.